to all of you. I'm Audrey Buffington from South Thomaston, and I feel as if I should be sort of the romper room lady and say hello to all of you out there, Ralph and Maggie and Margaret and everybody, because I think many of you who are watching me probably remember romper room. But this is much more serious than that. I want to talk to parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, students, teachers, everybody. This is extremely serious, some of the education bills that we have before the legislature now. And today I'm going to be talking mainly about those. And I want to tell you ahead of time, there are some that make me cry. So I have my tissues ready. And there are some that make me nauseous. So these are barf bags from the airport, just in case. Now, the ones I want to go over are not entertainment. So get over the Super Bowl from last night if you happen to watch that, with so many people just egging for entertainment. This is serious business that we need to look at. I want to talk about a couple of bills first, and if you don't get the bill or want to read it all, go to this source, maine.gov/legis, short for legislature / and immediately will come up on the screen a place for you to fill in the name of the legislative document, and that's what LD means, that you want. So let's say you want legislative document 1645. This is one that talks to the community colleges, the University of Maine system, all of the colleges here in Maine that are public schools, and it says to them, we want you to keep a record of every student who takes a remedial course, put them in some sort of a format that you can send it to us. We want to know the schools from which they came, the disciplines in which they are now enrolled, the remedial courses, whether it's math or language arts, and then we want to post it on your website, or rather you will post it on your website, all of the students who came from whatever schools. Now it seems like so much of this is threatening. You have to do this or we're going to post it. You have to do this. I don't think in education we need to be threatened. Rewarded maybe, but not threatened. That's Bill 1645. And then we have a legislative document 1770. And this is about parental involvement. Now, they act as if no school district has ever wanted their parents to be involved before. We work with parents. We used to have active PTAs, parent-teacher associations, and then the number of parents who could come to those meetings dwindled and dwindled, because our parents in today's world are really busy. If you have one child or several children and work one job or two jobs, you are busy because being a parent is almost a full-time job. So when they say we want them more involved, well, that's great. Here I have the bill, and you can see it's just about, 5 or 6 pages long, an act to encourage parental involvement in education. So if you want to read all about that, go to this website and look up this bill. The locals are already doing this. We don't need to be told by the state. We want the parents to be involved. We encourage it. And then it says through the involvement part that we have to notify parents of just about everything that goes on in the schools. Well, we do that. Every school has a handbook. Oceanside East and West have this handbook that they give out to students that says almost everything in there that you could ever possibly want to know about the staff, the courses, any disciplinary actions that will be taken for various and sundry reasons. Let's see, what else? The student intervention team and student educational records. Everything that you could want is in here. My only problem with this is I'm not sure that these are printed out and handed to every student. These may be on the RSU 13 website. You may have to go there and look at it. Now, if that's the case, you can call your school, call the principal, call the superintendent's office, and say you would like a hard copy. Because when I sit down and look at the computer and try to read a document this size, you can forget it. My eyes are tearing up then, not from sadness, but just from the looks on the screen. Which brings me to another point that I want to inject. We don't know what damage there's going to be to the eyes and the sight of our students when they have been glued to a screen, be it a TV screen, a computer screen, the laptop screen, the iPods, iPads, whatever they have. Yet, because they haven't been out long enough. But I can remember that back in the 60s, when my sister started working in a business in accounts receivable, and for the first time in her life, she sat 8 hours looking at a TV screen, and her eyesight started to deteriorate. So I would like to know whether we have any research on this or not before we tell a parent to sit down and read this document off of 37 pages off of the computer. But it is there. Now, this bill that I was just talking about, Bill 1770, about getting parents involved, I wanted to say that all of our schools have student handbooks, and these are available for parents and for every student, and aunts and uncles and anybody else who wants to read them. Only I'm afraid that this one might be just online. So if you have trouble reading 37 pages online as I do and your eyes begin to tear, then call the superintendent's office or call your principal's office and ask for a printed copy of this. And that brings me to another point that I just want to throw in here. We don't know yet how all of this computer stuff is working with our students and their vision, how it's affecting them. If they look at a TV a lot in the evening, and there's some research that says many kids watch an average of 4 hours a day, and then if they are on their laptops, and I know that's a kind of computer, but it's different from the TV screen that they have, and their iPads and iPods and everything else, that could mean also when they're on it at school that they might be on 6, 7, 8 hours a day. That's way too long because we have no research. I can just tell you from my sister's point of view, when she started working back in the 80s for the first time in her life on a computer screen for 8 hours a day, her vision deteriorated. So I think we need to do some work on that, do some research before we glue these kids in front of the computers hour in and hour out. Okay, the next one I want to mention is LD 1273. Now, this is a really interesting bill. It says that 2 weeks before any sports season, the coaches may not have any interaction with the people on their team at all. No coaching, no talking to them about the whole thing. Now, really, do we need the legislature to be involved in this? These are the things that make me cry. We have a Maine Principals Association. We have a Maine Athletic Association. I'm sure there's probably a coaches group. I didn't look that up. But it's up to them to make that kind of decision and what's best for their kids. We do not need to bother the legislature with legislation on interscholastic activities and a 2-week quiet period. This is the one where I need both tissues and barf bags. It's Bill 1422. And this bill does everything from age 1 through college, just about. It tells you that in age 1 and age 2, now I'm not talking about first and second grade, I'm talking about age 1 and age 2, that doctors or hospitals or psychologists or somebody should be examining the child to make sure that there are no problems and that he or she will be ready for kindergarten. Now, I don't think that's necessary. I also don't think that we need pre-kindergarten classes. I've done a lot of reading lately, and one of the books I have read is this one, Brain Rules for Children, and I've made a lot of notes from this. And it says that the children less than 5 years old should not be bothered with a whole bunch of academics, but rather they should have a chance to feel safe at home or in a preschool if you have them there, and that they should be playing games and having fun and understanding directions. This book might be a good one to buy if you have a child between the ages of 1 and 5, or call me and you can borrow this copy from me. But we don't need all of that. Now, the interesting thing is, and I hope I remember what I was going to say next, that out of the 28 people who testified in regard to this bill, 6 of them were really involved in education, like the School Boards Association, the State Principals Association, 5 of those. They have great concerns about this. The people who think it's a wonderful bill primarily were interested in youth. For instance, there was one group called Fight Crime. They are saying that if they get to these children early enough and get them into school and teach them all these little things, that it's less likely that they will ever be found to be a criminal or go to jail or be arrested or anything like that. Excuse me, I don't want you filling my first and second and 5-year-old and 4-year-old kids with that. I want the parents to know that. So why aren't we doing something to educate the parents, like having in high schools perhaps a parenting course so that they know what it's like to be a parent and what's required, instead of taking our kids out of the cradle, so to speak, and indoctrinating them with whatever they might get. I mean, if you're just telling them about don't be a bad or naughty boy or girl, and don't do this, and don't set fires, and don't handle guns, or whatever you might have, that's okay. But I still say it's up to the parents to do that. And so if we didn't have that little section in there, probably those groups, like fight crimes and others, might not even be in there talking about it. The other important groups that are ones they're talking about are they're reacting to things like, by the end of 3rd grade, every student will be proficient in math and reading. Now, of course, we don't know what proficient is yet. Nobody has defined that. We don't have the tests that are going to test that in 3rd grade. Well, we do have the MEAs. I'll get to testing maybe in another session when I talk about this. There are lots of tests out there, but none of them are really reliable because we don't have a lot of baseline data with which we can compare the data we get. So we can't tell for sure if they're proficient at the end of 3rd grade. And then they say, well, we'll discover that by testing the students as they begin 4th grade to see if they are proficient in math and reading. One big problem with that. Some of you might have remembered that back in November, we were talking about the Common Core State Standards. Those are national standards that were put together by 3, essentially, math educators all across the United States. They were reviewed by a lot of people. The National Governors Association and the State Principals Association, or chief school officers, I think, went together and said, oh, we should all be teaching the same thing at the same time. I have no problem with that. Except when I looked at the standards, they don't teach you how to read a ruler or how to read the thermometer. They don't talk about division by 0 and a whole bunch of other things aren't even in there. But Maine, along with 47 other states, adopted these Common Core State Standards. And we're going to have assessments for those, which are being put together for $350 million that the federal government has given to a group, one of them headed by Susan Gendron, who used to be our commissioner. And maybe we will find out what proficiency is at that point, but I doubt it. But the interesting thing is that the Common Core State Standards are grade level. You need to know this by the end of grade 2, by the end of grade 3, by the end of grade 6, by the end of grade 9. You need to know this in high school. But the standards-based education that's discussed in this bill, 1422, has no grade levels. If you listened to Steve Bowen when he was in Camden on a supposed listening tour to parents and educators who were interested there, he said, there will be no 3rd grade from now on. There will be a list of standards, and each student will progress at his or her own rate. And this list will be on a chalkboard, on a piece of paper or something, and you can use a clothespin. This was happening in one class that he visited, I think, to show that you have moved to the next standard. Now, I was never really for this push we had on self-esteem, because it got to the point where we gave every kid on the losing team a trophy. And it didn't make any difference what the child did. They didn't really have to put forth a lot of effort for this. They would get the child would get a reward or an award. I'm not in favor of that. But certainly this is the direct opposite of being interested in a student's self-esteem, because we're putting up for everybody to see that here are a couple of students who are up here on standard 24, and back here is a student or two on standard 3. How is that student going to feel? Now, I'm going to put together a whole session on just standards-based education. You need to know that. But part or the most of this bill, 1422, deals with that. Now, I will say this again on another session. When every educator who supports this, from the Commissioner of Education to the manager of the Bangor Bank and anybody else who testified on behalf of this, if they are willing to take an assignment with a group of kids for a full year and teach them using standard-based education and tell me that it's workable, you may convince me that I'll go along with it. Until then, forget it. And there'll be more. Maybe I can think of one or two positive things, but maybe only one at the most. A whole bunch of negative things. Also, a huge part of this has to do with graduation requirements. We've been through this over and over. Every district has policies on graduation requirements. How many courses you have to take, when, and at what level do you have to excel? Do you have to go through Algebra 2 and say that you're proficient in Algebra 2 and no more math, or you've got to require 4 years of math? Now, this bill requires 4 years of math. And let me show you something. This was the Learning Results Booklet that was published in 1995. It was going to be the answer to the prayers of every student, parent, citizen in the state of Maine. Because after we had all of these learning results and the students had become proficient in English language arts, mathematics, modern and classical languages, science and technology, that was great. Now this says, I think it's by 2015, I would have to look that up, that the students have to be proficient in all of these to graduate. Then a couple of years after that, I believe it's 2018, I should have known and put it down, sorry, but I will look it up. They have to also be proficient in modern and classical languages, visual and performing arts, and career preparation. Now, I ask you, if since 1997, actually the bill came out in 95, but this was published in 97, if in all those years we have not been able to come up with assessments in every one of those areas to show that our students are proficient, then how do we think that in the next couple of years we're going to be able to do that? In addition to which, this bill says that a student will stay in high school for 4, 5, or 6 years until they are proficient in each one of these. Meanwhile, our goal is to get every student to graduate from high school and every student to be prepared for college or a career or a technical vocation. I wonder, we have an awful lot of people in this area who lobster. A lot of their kids want to follow in their dad's or grandfather's or uncle's footsteps. Do you really think that that student is going to stay in school, boy or girl, for 6 years, becoming proficient in career education, classical modern languages, and what was the other one I just said? Good grief, I can't even remember what it was. Visual and performing arts? They want to be proficient in that, and they'll stay there for 6 years when they already have their career cut out. I think that we need to look into this because it could be that we will be having more students drop out of school than more students staying in school for 6 years to be prepared for a career. In addition to that, this also says, this bill, that there are 6 guiding principles that our students need to be prepared for or have these as prerequisites to graduation. They must be a clear and effective communicator, a self-directed and lifelong learner, a creative and practical problem solver, a responsible and involved citizen, a collaborative and quality worker, an integrated and informed thinker. Now, I ask you, I've been in education since 1952. Maybe I shouldn't tell you that. And I haven't a clue how we're going to measure those to determine whether or not the student is proficient in each of those. And I believe that it's going to be up to the locals to make that decision. Now also, in order to graduate and show proficiencies in these areas, you don't just have to take a test. You can have a project, a portfolio, just about anything else that you can come up with. Because remember, by this time, you're going to be working at your own rate. And you're going to be looking at this set of standards, and you'll say, I think to show that I'm proficient in that standard, I would like to build something, or I would like to draw something, or I would like to write a paper, or I would like to copy something off the computer. Who knows what they're going to come up with as an example of showing that they are knowledgeable and know all the prerequisites for that particular discipline. Now, they did have in the bill, and that has been taken out, fortunately, that every seventh grader and on up the scale would have an individualized education plan, an IEP. I wrote to all the people. The original bill indicated that students were supposed to, from seventh grade on up, have an IEP, excuse me, an individualized education plan. Now, obviously, I responded to the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee on this issue. They weren't giving public hearings anymore. They were just having work sessions. But I wrote to all of them and said, this is crazy. Our special education students have IEPs. Just ask any special education teacher or classroom teacher who's working with those students how much time it takes to fill out all the forms, have all the meetings that are required with the parent or guardian or guardians about the plan for these students. We can't do that for every student grade 7 and on up. Fortunately, they took that out. Now, I thought you might be interested in what some of the people said who testified. I'll get this together here in a minute. I hope they're off the thingy. Here we are. I had mentioned about some of the persons or groups who spoke regarding LD 1422. They say that they were in support of them. Senator Langley, America's Edge, which was signed by 45 big CEOs from business, Duke Albany's, the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, the Maine Coalition for Excellence in Education had 6 different people speaking in their behalf, the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, Yellow Light Green spoke for Prepare Maine. There was Jobs for Maine's Graduates, Fight Crime, Invest in Kids. 2 different people testified. Maine Children's Growth Council, the Maine's Children's Alliance, Steve Bowen, of course, from the Department of Education, Major General Earl Adams, Military Readiness for Kids, and there were 5 who were neither in support nor against. Now, when you hear their comments, and I'll just read a couple lines from each, you will understand why they didn't say they were against. I don't think that if you're part of the educational system here and you're looking to the state for funding, for building, for curriculum, or anything else, that you don't dare maybe say to them, I'm against this humongous bill. Here is the president of the Maine School Board Association. The calls for screening of all kindergarten children to determine their readiness for school. It's required under routine technical rule, which we oppose. Then there are concerns about the language around the standards-based diplomas. The language is vague, and again, it calls for the Commissioner of Education to do this through routine rulemaking. The creation of a strategic plan and lists of numbers of stakeholders. Now, stakeholders are groups of people who I assume have a stake in the issue that they're addressing. And in the new plan for Maine, there are 22 stakeholder groups. 22. Okay, then there is the Maine Principals Association. The benchmarks are overly aggressive, with proficiency in 2015 for most content areas expected of students. These are years of professional development and training to be there are years of professional development and training to be implemented before most teachers, principals, and communities are ready for implementation. Some communities have been working on this for 10 years and still face difficulties. The uniform kindergarten screening process was a real problem for the Maine Principals Association. And then we have a member of a school board who said there are very tight time frames, highly ambitious benchmarks. Despite our can-do attitude in this district where she works, and have a tax base that may be able to support this, most districts will not be able to. It's going to be expensive. And then the Maine Community College said it's a massive paradigm shift in public education to an outcomes-driven system. It calls for tens of millions of dollars in new money. There are goals, performance outcomes, and time frames, but are they the right goals, the right outcomes, and is the time frame realistic? There should be at least 5 years planning that goes into this strategic plan. So I want you to know that I'm not the only one out there who is concerned about this. Maybe it could be changed just a little bit, like the Maine learning results. I wrote to them and said, of course, I didn't come here until 1994, and it was pretty well along the line by that time. You have designed a castle when you only have the money and expertise for a cottage. They have done the same thing with this. This affects every child, every parent, aunt and uncle, grandmother, citizen, taxpayer, educator in the state of Maine. This is too big a bill for us to have the legislature pass it and say, this is what we want for our kids in Maine. You must call your legislators, call your principals, call your superintendents, call your school board, and tell them to discuss it and that you don't want it as it stands right now. It's too comprehensive, it's too costly, it's too fast, and we're going to be cleaning up the mud that this leaves a couple of years down the road. Thank you for listening to this. I hope you'll be watching again when I talk more about standards-based education.